Let's discuss now the replacements, ideal candidates to take over for Manny Diaz if and when he accepts the Duke head coaching job. It's not official yet, but it looks like the terms are being finalized here. I got 5 candidates since my 2 home run hires outside of the program, Deanton Lynn and Elijah Robinson are off the board. You could still make a push for Elijah Robinson but I don't think since he just accepted the defensive coordinator spot at Syracuse, I don't think that he's going to turn away from them to come back to Penn State. But it would have made a lot of sense if he was still available. Same thing with Lynn leaving UCLA to go to USC. Those two would have been out of the park, my seal of approval. But you can only look in the past so much. You got to look towards the future here. My pick and my prediction to take over as Penn State's next defensive coordinator is Anthony Poindexter. This one is the move to make. He's been on staff for quite some time now. He's familiar. He's the co-defensive coordinator already. So he's second in command to Manny Diaz. That means he has the second most influence. That means he's designing the game plans. He's a former defensive coordinator in his own right. He's been working closely with the secondary. And Penn State secondary has been really good the past few seasons. He was almost hired away by his alma mater. So he's viewed already as a head coaching candidate at the Power 5 level. The fact that this is all the evidence that I need to see here. You have to read in between the lines with these cases. The fact that Anthony Poindexter, who was rumored to be an all but done deal to go to Virginia here, his alma mater, and he turned it down to return to Penn State as an assistant coach, tells me the conversations that were had behind closed doors. Penn State knew that Manny Diaz was going to leave in 2 to 3 years. James Franklin probably had an honest conversation. If and when Manny Diaz accepts the job, you will be the next defensive coordinator, and we are going to hire internally. Penn State probably worked overtime to keep him around for this exact reason. And here we are. So Anthony Poindexter, in my opinion, will be and should be the next defensive coordinator. You don't miss a beat. This also covers some other spots too. This checks some other boxes. The players that are upset, that are disgruntled, you keep player morale, you keep staff morale at an all-time high because Anthony Poindexter is already on staff and has all of these great relationships. He knows the team. He knows the players. He's already working with them closely. If you go and hire outside of the program, outside of the system, once again, who knows what assistant coaches could leave? Who knows what players could leave in the transfer portal? You basically put a lot of that to rest by promoting Anthony Poindexter within. So I don't think you go outside. If Penn State does in fact say that James Franklin wants to, and look what happened last time, 2015. In 2015, Penn State went outside to go get Joe Moorhead from Fordham after they fired, After they fired their offensive coordinator and John Donovan, and Bob Stoops leaves for the Tennessee defensive coordinator job, and they promote within and make Brent Pry the defensive coordinator. That's all I'm saying. It's a weird deja vu, folks. It is really strange. So my pick is Anthony Poindexter. I not only predict him to be the next defensive coordinator, but this is my choice who I would pick to be the next defensive coordinator for Penn State. I already made my case for Elijah Robinson, but he is not available. And I don't think he's going to turn over because that would look really bad. You don't sign with the program. You do. We've seen Josh McDaniels do it in the NFL, right? We've seen him agree to be a head coach and then say, no, I'm going to stay, or I'm going to leave. I'm not going to accept it. That's a really bad look. And I think Elijah Robinson has too much self-respect and mutual respect for the staff he's joining at Syracuse to do that. But here are some other realistic options if Penn State is going to go outside of the program again, like they did with Andy Kotelnicki. Someone who has been brought up a lot is Zach Arnett. Mississippi State going through some coaching changes here. He was the defensive coordinator at Mississippi State with the Bulldogs from 2020 to 2022. This one doesn't make sense to me because he's coached in the SEC a long time. I mean, and doesn't really have a lot of connections to Penn State in the Big Ten. Now, Manny Diaz didn't really either, but it seems like James Franklin and Manny Diaz already had a connection because of his time in the SEC, or in the time being down south, being at Vanderbilt. But I think because Arnett has a similar style to Diaz of that attacking style, from what we know, from what we've seen, it's an aggressive defense. How much do you want to change? And that's why Poindexter makes a lot of sense, because Poindexter is already coaching a defense that's attacking style in nature. He doesn't have this different style of defense that is going to completely reinvent the wheel. He's just going to pick up where Manny Diaz left off. So Poindexter, more of the case for him to be the next guy. But Arnett fits the theme. I also worry about this too. Arnett's probably going to be in the same boat of looking to be a head coach at some point in time. And so is Anthony Poindexter. But I feel like Poindexter would stick around for 3 to 4, 5 years. He passed up his alma mater. He could have been hired as the next UVA head coach and said, you know what? I'm going to stay as a Penn State assistant. What is Arnett's loyalty to Penn State if he were to come in? That's my biggest concern here. But you get a nice young up and coming defensive mind, but somebody who's going to have certainly head coaching aspirations once again. Another one on this list that does make a lot of sense because he's coached in the Big Ten. He's been a head coach in the Big Ten, and he is a defensive mastermind. Maybe he's not the best head coach, but that is Tom Allen. Tom Allen recently let go by Indiana in favor of Curt Cignetti, and that's fine. But I also could see Tom Allen accepting an analyst job too. I like Tom Allen a lot. I think I do truly believe that he schemes very well. He understands how to game plan. I just don't know who he is as a head coach, but you're not asking him to be the head coach, the CEO. You're asking him to be responsible for the defensive unit. He understands the Big Ten. He's recruited as a head coach. Players really like him. And what he was able to do less with more. Those Indiana defenses, not as of late, but over his tenure, were pretty respectable for the level of talent that they had. And they were able to provide fits across the conference there. So they, remember how good they were in the COVID season. And I know the circumstances there and how they were able to, but Tom Allen found some success, but he's a defensive guy. I would like him to come on as an analyst if that's a possibility. Ola Adams leaves. I would like to see Penn State possibly make him an analyst if there is a spot to do that. One that I've seen brought up, some people agree with this one a lot, others don't, and that is Jim Leonhard. Well, we know Jim Leonhard's track record. He was doing very well at Wisconsin. Paul Chryst was fired. He became the interim head coach, and then he wasn't retained. They ended up going in a different direction with Luke Fickell, but the former defensive coordinator, he's now a senior defensive analyst at Illinois. This one could make sense from the fact that he's not officially a defensive coordinator. He is an analyst. So it's a promotion. It's a raise. Does Penn State, again, kind of the same thing with Arnett, does Penn State really want to go outside of the program for Jim Leonhard, attacking style defense, right? Very good. And he was a defensive back in the NFL. So he understands how to play, how to coach a very good secondary, understands recruiting. He's interviewed for head coaching spots. So Leonhard, another Penn State really can't go wrong with any of these candidates, to be honest, either. I think it's a win from any respective of if you go get Jim Leonhard, if you go get Tom Allen, if you go get Zach Arnett. My favorite, my most ideal candidate here is Anthony Poindexter because it just saves a lot of headaches, a lot of potential consequences if you hire from within. Penn State did it the last time in 2020 and 2015. And now here they are again in 2013. This one, I'll shout out Matty Fresh. Matt Freiler has been on the show as an esteemed guest for a lot of the time, but he brought this one up, and it's interesting, but I don't think it's I know it's not gonna happen. Pat Fitzgerald, former Northwestern head coach. PR matters. Public relations matters. I'm just including the name here because I think it's a point of discussion. Players respond to him. If you want to talk about somebody doing less with more, it is Pat Fitzgerald. If not for the Northwestern fallout, I'm not justifying it. I can't justify it because of the rumors, the allegations, everything that happened, allegedly at Northwestern. This one from a pure X's and O's coaching standpoint, yes, Pat Fitzgerald, if he was let go because things weren't working out for other reasons, then yes, Pat Fitzgerald would be probably one of my top defensive candidates if all these people were available, right? Lynn, Robinson, Fitzgerald, those would be my big three. But because of what happened, you cannot make that kind of move. That's a lot of red flags. A lot of red flags here. But Pat Fitzgerald, I think, is just an intriguing name from the discussion. He can coach. Like I said, he was able to do a lot at Northwestern, and he probably wants to be a head coach at some point again. I wouldn't blame him for that. But that's where I will leave. I will leave that one there just to include it because I like Matty Fresh a lot, and I thought it raised my eyebrows. Like, huh, that's not one that would have crossed my mind. But those are all the most likely candidates that Penn State could interview if they're not going to make Anthony Poindexter the next defensive coordinator. But I think they do, and that's the right decision. And it has I co-sign on that in my opinion. So everyone's probably wondering. This is what I want to finish with. Penn State replacing two coordinators because we've heard James Franklin say this, and it's very true. When you have to make staffing changes, that consistency, that status quo, it goes away. Relationships and dynamics change. We get that. We understand that because when coming into the 2023 season, James Franklin said, we're in a good position to succeed because we have Mike Yursich and Manny Diaz returning as both of the coordinators. And that was the first time that had happened in a long time in James Franklin's tenure. That is a rarity that happens where both coordinators return in the same offseason for a second or third year. And it didn't work out. It obviously did not work out. So James Franklin, he's right in the sentiment, but we figured out that Mike Yursich wasn't the offensive coordinator that we were led to believe. But look at 2015. Penn State fires John Donovan. Penn State goes out and hires, right? They hire outside of the program Joe Moorhead. And then Bob Stoops leaves for Tennessee to take the defensive coordinator job. And then they promote from within Brent Pry, an assistant, someone who's been with James Franklin for a long time. Here we go again. I'm not a deja vu, and I'm not saying that Penn State is going to win a Big Ten title because of this. But let's look at it this way. Penn State got its number one candidate on its offensive coordinator list in Andy Kotelnicki. I feel like Mike Yursich wasn't the number one choice a few years back. I feel like Penn State settled. They admitted James Franklin was honest and said Kotelnicki was our number one guy, and they got him. Okay. Anthony Poindexter could have left for Virginia to take the head coaching job where he's coached before, where he's played. And he stayed at Penn State as an assistant. How was Penn State able to convince him to stay when that Power 5 ACC head coaching job was there for him to take? It all makes sense. It all lines up. I think this is a lot of worst case scenarios could happen here. There could be fires everywhere. The infrastructure could be crumbling. And Penn State to make out with Andy Kotelnicki as your offensive coordinator and play caller, to promote from within, to keep everything going, to keep the ship afloat, and promote Anthony Poindexter, who is certainly more than qualified to take over at this point. Penn State is still in a really good spot to succeed for 2024. They are setting themselves up nicely under the circumstances. I don't think it's 2016 all over again because you're getting the Big Ten expansion, right? This is going to be the toughest schedule, at least in my recent memory, right? And I'm young. I'm in my late 20s, okay? So I don't remember all the past decades of Penn State football. But certainly from my point of view, this is by far the toughest schedule that Penn State is going to be playing in the regular season in 2024. And the fact that you get Kotelnicki, an improvement over Mike Yursich, and Anthony Poindexter, who isn't maybe could be described as an improvement over Manny Diaz, but it's certainly not a drop-off. It is certainly not a drop-off. Penn State makes out very well with these hypothetical moves here. One set in stone with Kotelnicki. We're anticipating that Poindexter should be and will be the next defensive coordinator.